Imagine you have spent your entire life facing a wall. You cannot turn around. You cannot leave. All you can see are shadows moving in front of you. A shadow shaped like a horse appears. Everyone says horse. Someone correctly predicts which shadow comes next and is immediately treated as a serious expert. There may be a small ceremony, possibly a hat. Then one prisoner is dragged outside and discovers actual horses, actual trees, and an alarmingly bright object called the sun. This is Plato's cave. But what does it actually mean? The usual answer is that reality might be fake, like a simulation. That is not completely unrelated, but it misses Plato's main concerns. The cave is about education, appearance, knowledge, and what an educated person owes everyone still staring at the wall. It is not merely asking whether the shadows are fake. It is asking what happens when an entire mind has been shaped by shadows. The allegory appears in Book 7 of Plato's Republic. Socrates asks Glaucon to imagine prisoners living underground from childhood. Their legs and necks are chained, so they can only look forward. Behind them is a fire. Between the fire and the prisoners, people carry statues and other objects along a raised walkway. These objects cast shadows on the wall. The carriers sometimes speak, and echoes make the voices seem to come from the shadows. For the prisoners, these shadows are not poor copies of reality. They are reality. They have never seen anything else. They might give names to the shapes. They might compete to remember the order in which they appear. The best shadow watcher could become wealthy, admired, and almost unbearable at dinner, assuming dinner is possible while chained by the neck. Then one prisoner is released. This does not feel wonderful. When he turns toward the fire, the light hurts. The objects creating the shadows look confusing. If someone tells him that these objects are more real than the familiar shapes on the wall, he will probably think this person is being difficult on purpose. Next, he is pulled up the rough path out of the cave. Sunlight blinds him. At first, he can only look at shadows, then reflections, then physical things. Eventually, he can look toward the sun and understand that it makes sight and life possible. This upward movement is the heart of the allegory. Plato introduces the cave as a comparison for the effect of education and the lack of education on human nature. Education for him is not simply placing facts inside an empty head, like stuffing receipts into a drawer. The prisoner already has eyes. The problem is that they are pointed in the wrong direction. Plato says education must turn the whole soul around. A person's attention, habits, desires, and standards of judgment have to change together. You do not become educated merely by receiving new information. You learn to recognize what deserves your attention and what kind of reasons should guide belief. That is why leaving the cave is painful. Serious learning can make our old categories stop working. The confident shadow expert becomes a confused beginner. His status disappears. His eyes hurt. Nobody has provided a comfortable chair. If you enjoy bad drawings doing unpaid labor for careful thinking, subscribe, and we will continue turning major philosophical systems into worried potatoes. The cave therefore represents more than ignorance. It represents a complete environment of thought. The prisoners have language, social approval, competitions, and trusted authorities. Their beliefs seem reasonable because everyone around them uses the same evidence. They are not unusually stupid. They are adapted to the only world they know. That makes the cave easy to apply to social media, advertising, propaganda, or an algorithm showing us an endless line of angry rectangles. Those can certainly become modern walls of shadows. But Plato's point is broader. Simply putting down your phone does not automatically place you outside the cave. You can touch grass while holding confused beliefs about justice, goodness, and knowledge. The grass will not intervene. The cave is not one particular technology. It is the human tendency to mistake appearances for the deeper reality that explains them. This is where Plato's theory of forms matters. Plato believed that the changing things we encounter through the senses do not provide the highest kind of knowledge. We see particular actions that seem fair or unfair, for example, but philosophy asks what justice itself is. We see many beautiful things, all of which change or decay, but we can still ask what makes them beautiful. The forms are Plato's answer. They are stable, intelligible realities such as justice, beauty, and equality. Physical things are imperfect examples. Thinking rises beyond the examples and tries to understand the structure they share. The sun outside the cave represents the form of the good. Just as the visible sun makes sight possible, the good makes understanding possible. It is not merely one useful fact among others. It is what allows us to understand why things are worth knowing and how different truths fit together. So the cave is not simply a contrast between false images and ordinary physical objects. Plato is describing levels of understanding. A shadow is an image of an object. The object itself is more real than its shadow. But even ordinary objects objects belong to the changing visible world. Philosophical understanding aims higher, toward the stable principles that make knowledge possible. This is why calling the cave an early version of the Matrix can mislead us. In a simulation story, the main discovery is often that your physical surroundings were secretly artificial. Wake up, inspect the machinery, and you have found the real world. For Plato, waking up is intellectually harder. You might leave one false environment and carry the same unexamined mind with you. Changing rooms is not the same as understanding reality. There is also no simple promise that the people making the shadows are secretly controlling everything. The puppet carriers can suggest poets, politicians, teachers, and other makers of public images. But Plato does not give every figure one fixed modern job title. The deeper problem is that a society can reward skill at handling appearances. Someone may become excellent at predicting opinions, winning arguments, or repeating accepted phrases without understanding what any of them are for. The cave produces expertise, but it may be expertise in shadows. Then comes the political part, which is often removed from simplified versions of the story. After adjusting to the world outside, the freed prisoner would naturally prefer to remain there. Life below now seems cramped and confused. Yet Socrates says the educated person must return to the cave. When he goes back underground, his eyes cannot immediately adjust to the darkness. The prisoners see him stumbling and conclude that leaving the cave ruined him. If he tries to release them, Socrates suggests they may resist violently and even kill him. This recalls the fate of Socrates, who was executed by Athens. But within the Republic, it also explains Plato's idea of the philosopher-ruler. People who understand the good should govern, Plato argues, not because political power is a pleasant reward for finishing philosophy school, but because they are least likely to crave power for its own sake. They return because justice requires it. The city helped educate them. Their knowledge creates an obligation to serve the whole community, including people who do not welcome the assistance. This changes the moral of the cave. The enlightened person is not supposed to stand outside shouting, "You are all sheep," before beginning a podcast. Leaving is only half the task. The other half is returning without becoming either useless or tyrannical. And here, the allegory creates a serious problem. How does someone know they have really escaped? Every fanatic thinks other people are trapped by appearances. A person who claims special access to truth can use the cave to justify arrogance, censorship, or rule by a self-appointed enlightened class. Plato's own political solution is deeply elitist. He does not trust ordinary democratic judgment, and his ideal city gives enormous authority to carefully educated guardians. Even if we accept that knowledge matters in politics, we can still question who designs the education, who tests the supposed knowers, and what happens when the philosopher-ruler is actually just another shadow expert with a larger hat. The allegory also makes education sound like movement toward one final, objective order. Many later thinkers reject Plato's forms, or doubt that political questions have one answer waiting in the sunlight. Still, the cave identifies a durable difficulty. We cannot examine our assumptions from nowhere. We begin inside languages, customs, institutions, and habits we did not choose. Even the tools we use to question our world were partly given to us by that world. So Plato's cave does not mean that everything you see is fake. It does not mean that disagreeing with society proves you are enlightened. And it does not mean the clever person escapes while the foolish masses remain underground. The freed prisoner is confused, dependent on education, and obligated to return. His journey is not a victory pose. It is a painful reorientation followed by public responsibility. The real question is not whether you are in the cave. Plato assumes that in some sense we all begin there. The question is what could turn you around, what you would recognize as better evidence, and what you would owe other people if you ever reached clearer light. Perhaps the most dangerous shadow is the flattering one that tells us we have already escaped.